Hey, welcome. This is Luke Humphrey with LukeHumphreyRunning.com, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about winter speed work and why it's important to get creative. We've been getting a lot of questions, people whether or not they should skip their workouts or how they should approach them during the winter weather. And if you follow the Hansons Marathon Method, which I'm the author of that book, you know that the speed work is in the beginning of the marathon plan. So if you're training for an April or May marathon, right now you're trying to do faster work where it may or may not be a reality. So I want to talk about what your options are, what to consider, and why it's important. So what our problem is if you're anywhere in most of the U.S. right now, especially as the time I'm recording this, it's a very big polar vortex coming through the country, and so a lot of places are really cold, pretty windy out, and things like that. But in general, if you're in a winter climate, what you're dealing with is poor footing. You might not have access to the track. For instance, me and my training buddy Alex, we were able to shovel off lane one at the local high school track, but now that is not a possibility. Once you get that first snowfall of 6 to 8 inches, 10 inches of snow, the shoveling tends to just not happen anymore. So you're dealing with poor footing, sidewalks, roads, whatever the case is, where you don't have proper footing, don't have access to the track. You have the cold temps and wind chill like we talked about, and on top of that, the high where I'm at right now is going to be about 10 degrees today. So you go out for a run, you're wearing extra clothes. You might be wearing a few layers on top, and you might be wearing a few layers on your legs too. Thicker socks. The shoes don't seem to be as flexible. All those things, and all these things actually add up to us not being able to run the paces that we're used to. And that's what we're talking about, right? We tend to compare a workout that we're doing now to, say in the spring when we're on the track, it's 50 degrees, we're wearing shorts, all that stuff, and we're able to hit those most ideal paces. And we don't necessarily make that connection, or we just get like, oh, we're not tough enough if we're not hitting those paces. Whatever the case is, we tend to just kind of forget where we're at right now and compare it to what we should be. And also too, like if you're following a plan and you plug in the paces and it says, do your speed work at 5K to 10K pace, and your 5K to 10K pace is based off of what you could do in the summer, that's not necessarily going to line up with what you're doing right now. So we have to be careful of that. Why it matters is that regardless of how we measure intensity, so if you're measuring intensity via heart rate, whether you're using power or pace, which is what I'm most familiar with, we're trying to elicit a certain physiological response, right? So we're trying to get to a point where we're going to trigger physiological adaptations, and that's going to make us faster and stronger and all that good stuff. So in this case, we tend to represent that as a percentage of VO2 max. So say for speed work, if we're trying to do 5K pace, we're trying to be at roughly 90% of our VO2 max. That's what we would like to do in order to see those physiological adaptations occur. So that's why we're talking about this. So uh, the variables of that, and this will get into why we're talking about this, is VO2 is expressed as ml per kg per minute, or milliliters of oxygen per kilogram of body weight per minute of exercise. And so right away we know that our body weight is a factor, right? If we've put on the Corona 15, that's going to be a factor in our VO2, right? So or in this case, if we're wearing heavy tights and wool socks, mittens, hats, heavy jacket, and all this stuff, and even then you tend to lock in that sweat. It doesn't evaporate as well, so that ends up freezing to your arms and stuff like that. And so all of a sudden you're weighing 5 pounds more. That's going to have a factor in your VO2. You can increase that, but our body weight's gone up, so our relative VO2 is actually going to come down. And so we also know that speed is a factor, right? If we're running 6 minute per mile pace versus 5 minute per mile pace, that's going to elicit a higher VO2. And then also, which we sometimes tend to forget about, is incline or grade is another factor. So in a previous life, I did cardiac stress testing at a local hospital. And so if you're familiar with that at all, you use what's called the Bruce protocol. And so speed will change a little bit, but your main variable of changing is incline, right? So if you're on a treadmill and you have, a 60, 70-year-old person on there with poor balance, you'd rather have them walk at a higher grade than forcing them to run on a treadmill, right? So that's why you can do that in that setting and still get the VO2 that you're looking for. And honestly, when I was in college, that's what we used a lot too. Most of those people were training for a clinical type setting, but those are the two main factors, right? It's either speed or grade or a combination of the two. All right, so to further that, American College of Sports Medicine, they have an indirect calculation. And the simplest form is the VO2 equals your H plus V plus R, where H is your horizontal, so that would be your speed, and then your vertical would be your grade, and then your resting would be a static variable that does not change. That's kind of your anchor point there. So if on a track, our increase in VO2 is going to come from a change of pace, right? So the grade's not changing, but our pace is changing, and that's what's going to change our VO2. So if we're on a hill and pace is mostly static, if we're running a certain pace, the hills was actually providing the increase in the VO2 max, because our pace will actually slow down, right? So on a track, say that's 5-minute pace, on a hill, that same response is going to maybe be 5:30 pace, right? It's going to be significantly slower, but we're still getting the same VO2 response. And then obviously a person's weight would then factor in relatively, because VO2 is going to give us an absolute number, and then to get it to that ml per kg per minute, you would have to factor in the person's body weight. So if a person has a higher body weight, that relative number is going to come down. And so that's why all three of those factors play a big role in what the VO2 numbers are going to be. All right, so what does this all have to do with speed workouts? So it shows us why hills are speed work in disguise, right? So if you're doing them outside, you can't really change the grade of the hill, but your speed will change. And so it's a combination of running slower, but running up a hill is going to give you that same VO2 as that if you were running on a track. And then also, this is a good time too, where I think that where treadmills are a good situation, right? So like most of you, I don't really necessarily want to be on the treadmill every day, but if I'm doing my easy runs outside and I'm just going out and covering ground on an easy day, I could maybe come in to the treadmill, once a week, and instead of doing, say 12 by 400, I could do 12 by, 2-minute hills, and I can change the grade to match how fast I necessarily want to run. Because like you, a lot of you anyway, if I'm running, it's hard to run really fast on a treadmill. And so a lot of times you feel like you're going to blow off the back end. But I can slow the treadmill down a little bit and increase the grade of the treadmill to elicit the same VO2 that I'd be looking for if I was doing this on the track. And then you can control the distance you run on there, you can control the time you run on there, so there's a lot more factors in controlling what you're actually going to get done during the workout if by doing that on the treadmill. So I know a lot of you don't like doing them on the treadmill, but it's a matter of coming in once a week to get a specific workout in, it might be something that's more manageable for you. And then it shows you that the pace may not the pace may not be showing you the true number in terms of the intensity of the work that you're doing, right? So with the extra clothes and all that good stuff, you might be running slower but putting in just as much work. And also I think it shows why fartleks at effort over the winter especially elicit the same physiological responses even though the watch shows a slower pace. I think that's crucial, because I think a lot of times we look at that pace and it's slower and we don't think we're getting the same amount of work in. Truth is, you're probably getting at least the same amount of work in. So getting creative will make for, to me, it makes for better consistency, right? Because you can convince yourself to do that workout. It can give you a change of pace. It can give you, pun intended, and then it'll lead to faster springs because you can get that work in that you normally might have skipped, but you can get that in now, and that's going to lead to faster times in the spring. To me, it gives you a better mindset because you can convince yourself that, hey, I am getting all this work in and it's going to make me where I want to be come spring. And it's also a break in the mundane. So it's like if you are used to just, slogging around the sidewalks, but now you can go inside and do a hill workout and get the same thing you were looking for, a workout that you might not have done very well given the conditions, it can break things up for you and end up being a good situation to be in. So that's why I think it's important. I hope this helped you out some. and we'll see you next time. All right, bye-bye.